Hi everyone, welcome back to the art school vlog. Today we are finishing this painting that I started a few weeks ago that some of you may have seen. We're going to be rendering out the faces, adding to the background, and just overall have a good time. So buckle up as we finish this painting. So I first started by rendering out the top face because I said last week that I wish I had gotten this face done to add a little bit more context and have the painting make a little bit more sense. So I came in that day and just went straight to the face and started rendering out because I personally also wanted to see what it would look like with the top face rendered. So put a base down for the eye and a base down for the ear. Now these are first layers. These are not what it's going to look like at the end. They're very rough. It's just to get the pigment down, to have something work on top to render over top with for the second layer. And if any of you are interested in what materials I'm using, I mentioned the brands that I'm using down below, so if you're interested, you can go check it out over there. But just very briefly to recap if you missed last week's video, everything in this painting aside from the faces are rendered out with acrylic paint only, so the greens and the pinks. That's all acrylic right now, but the actual facial features and stuff are all in oil. The only reason why I mentioned that is because this acrylic versus oil situation I have is important because I run into a few issues with that later on in this video. So I usually with my process do a base layer of acrylic and then I render out with oils. But because of some of the colors that I was using, such as the pink for the heart, that's neon acrylic paint and I don't have any neon oil paints, and so I do run into a bit of an issue with not being able to use acrylic on top of oil, because if you didn't know, you can't put acrylic on top of oil, but you can put oil on top of acrylic. But I then wanted to use some of my acrylic colors because I wanted the background to come forward more, but I couldn't then layer the acrylic on top of the oil once I had already started rendering with oil. So just keep that in mind for the rest of the video. Here I'm starting to work on the other eye, and I'm only using Permanent Rose, which is the pink shade that I own, and it's a beautiful shade. I will say this many times, but I am only using Permanent Rose in this eye because the heart swoops over that eye and kind of creates like a filter. So I want it to look like that her eye is a part of the heart. And because I want to have a sort of filter effect, I don't want there to be thicker paint and thinner paint on that section, so I just pat it in with some paper towel to even it all out. And then I go ahead and start sketching in the hair. And for all the oil painting that I've done, I haven't used any medium. I've just used oil paint and thinner just for these first few layers, but I will go in later and use some linseed oil as I build up my layers. I'm going in now and using some acrylic paint to make the heart a little bit brighter, and this is what I mean when I was having a bit of a battle between the oil and acrylic, because I had already been using oil and I had to be very, very careful because I was now going in with acrylic. I usually always go in with acrylic first and then oil, and I never go back to acrylic once I start using oil. But I really wanted this heart to be brighter, so I had to be very careful and not get any of my acrylic paint in the oil sections, but it becomes a little bit more difficult later on as I continue working with oils, but want to bring the acrylic back. So I definitely need to start thinking about investing in some neon oil paint. If you guys have any recommendations on neon oil paints, please let me know because I have no idea. And once again, we are darkening this background. If you were here for last week's video, I was really struggling with applying enough contrast for the portraits to stand out, but not losing the green behind it, which I love, but it still wasn't contrasty enough. So I grabbed my paint roller and with very, very thick acrylic paint, I rolled all over the background and sort of merged it with the heart, knowing that I possibly won't be able to make the heart again with the bright neon paint. As I want the heart to ripple outwards, I will need to find a way to use oil paint and glaze over that to create that ripple effect. And usually I'm quite shy when it comes to adding textures because it's quite risky. I can't ever get that surface fully smooth again once I add textures to it, but I was really happy that I just went for it, and you can see all the different patterning that's happening in the background, and I do think that it contrasts really nicely with how smooth the skin is. I think it makes the flesh look even more like flesh. And so I head back over to the top face there and start rendering out the skin, and as you can see, I also render out the nose and the mouth area. Sorry I didn't film that. I will be cutting a lot of stuff out as well because this is over the space of 3 weeks, the creation of this painting, and if I included everything, it would be hours long in this video. So for the sake of time, I have cut out some stuff, but I am here to narrate you through it. And now I'm just working on the hands that start to merge with the bottom figure's face. And these hands, they're not done yet, but they end up being one of my favorite things. And now that it's the second layer for this bottom figure, I am upping the pigmentation. So I'm glazing over those shadow areas with just straight pigment. I'm using ultramarine blue to make sure that those shadows are as saturated as they can get. And I'm also darkening the point of contact where the finger meets the forehead to emphasize the pressure that's being put on our forehead. I think this will communicate more of the forcefulness that the top figure is doing to the bottom figure, making it a little bit more dynamic, having the pull from the top right hand corner of the face to the bottom left instead of diagonal motion. I really want to try and emphasize that. So I'm just darkening those creases to make it seem like her fingers almost puncturing her skin with the pressure. I talked about last week how when I did my acrylic underpainting, a drip formed where the eye of the top figure was going to go, so it made it look like that she was crying in the underpainting, and was a very happy coincidence. So I'm going to have the tear fall over her nose and into the bottom figure's eye, and so I just got some paint thinner, rubbed that back, and now it is actually the next day, so everything is dry at this point, and so I'm able to then do a second layer to finally get some good quality rendering on this thing, because before it was looking quite rough. And so I spent a few hours just painting this eye in, and I really had to test myself on my restraint, because there's nothing more that I want to do than to fully render out this entire face and make every section of this face covered. But I know it's not going to serve this painting in the long run, and I know I'm going to regret it, so I have to really restrain myself in how far I go to the edge. Here I start to add some transitional shades that merge into the forehead, and guys, foreheads are so underrated in my opinion. I love painting foreheads because it's like painting an egg. It's this cylindrical, perfect, smooth. All you gotta do is add some transitional shades and then get a brush and blend it all together, and you have so much form communicated, and it's super spherical, and I think it adds a lot personally. So I basically just added a bunch of transitional shades, and then very, very gently with a very clean, large brush, just gently tapped and merged those transitional shades together. And this is a quick before and after I used the big brush. Now you don't have to use a big brush and blend all that together like I did. You can just leave the transitional shades like that. But personally, it's such an easy way to communicate the form of a forehead, and it looks so smooth and just like, oh, I love it. And here I start to add some of the tears that are happening in her eye. It's not like that in the reference, don't worry, I didn't make my sister cry for this. Just to make it a little bit more obvious that that's a tear that's coming from her eye. And then I go in and start rendering out the other features. Since I had rendered out the eye and the forehead at this point, I wanted to see how it would look with all the features rendered. Oops, sorry, a little sidetrack. I guess I started rendering and then got distracted with the background again. And what I wanted to do was add a very, very thin layer of oil paint using a lot of paint thinner to add a glaze over just the black sections that I did with my roller and leave the acrylic green coming through. But when I mixed the oil paint with so much paint thinner, it did cloud up the richness a lot, which can be fixed with varnish. It did put me off for a very long time, and I thought I ruined it. So the background is going to remain quite dull until I can varnish it. As you can see, some areas are a lot richer than the others, and that's because of the oil paint. But time to press on, because this painting has taken me a lot longer than I expected. It's taken over 3 weeks now, so I kind of just had to push that to the side and get back to the rendering of this face, because I did abandon that for a little bit. And I do think that rendering this face did lift my spirits and my attitude towards this painting so far. But here it is at the end of the day. Now, coming up, we are heading into next week, where we do a rendering rapid fire. I'm about to knock out all the rendering in a couple of seconds, so prepare yourself, sit down, and watch closely, because you may miss it. All right, we come into the next week. I finish off the nose and the mouth. Boom, that face is done. Then I start to do some glazing with some permanent rose. And guys, this is what I was looking for. Look at the vibrancy of that pink. All I needed to do was swap out my paint thinner and thin it out instead with linseed oil, and it kept the pigmentation. And finally, the heart has movement to it. I mean, look at that. The color is exactly what I was looking for, and I thought it didn't exist, or at least I didn't have it in my possession at the time, and I thought this painting was hopeless. But no, I just needed to swap out the medium I was using, and I was very brave, and I glazed over the eye to make it look like the heart is weaving in and out of the figures. And then I went over to the nose of the second figure and fixed the proportions, added some color and some form. Boom, rendered that. Headed over to the mouth area, did the same thing. Boom, rendered that. Oh my god, This mouth is probably my favorite part. I spent a long time rendering the form and I think it paid off. Headed right over to the eye and boom, fixed the depth issue that I had, and now that whole face is rendered. Shove it on back down to the hand and boom, hand is rendered. I'm sorry, these transitions. But I'm happy to announce that we are officially done painting this painting. Thank you to everyone who's followed along on the journey, and now here is the reveal. Guys, so it is done. My final thoughts are, I think I actually like it. I think I go through these phases where rarely do I ever finish a painting and it worked out perfectly and I can feel satisfied with it. Usually I hate it for a long time and never want to show anybody. So the fact that I actually do like this painting, it's a good thing. We went through many different phases. Literally this week, I really did not like it. I think the main thing that helped me change my mind was pretty much this heart. What I wanted it to do was sort of radiate outwards. So I was really struggling with the pigmentation of the heart because I used pink neon acrylic paint for the heart initially for my acrylic base. But once I started to use oils, I then had to change over and use oil paint, but I didn't have any neon oil paint. So I decided to use the pink that I do have, which is, it's called Permanent Rose. Beautiful color. And I was thinning it down with paint thinner to sort of use washes to have the heart come outward. But the thing about paint thinner is that it does desaturate the color. And so I was using the Permanent Rose and then it was like super desaturated. I was getting really upset. But then I decided to use linseed oil. I got some linseed oil in this cat food can. I've used it for other previous paintings and I don't know why I didn't think of it beforehand, but linseed oil thins out your paint but also keeps the pigmentation, which was super helpful. And as soon as I did that, my thoughts about this painting changed. So overall, I think I really like it. Future painting ideas. I think I'm going to continue with this style. I'm going to continue with the green base. Next week, I think I'm going to go really big and do a really big piece because I'm pretty much at this point at art school preparing for the big show at the end. And so now I'm just preparing for stuff to go into that because it's taken me all year to finally find something that I actually enjoy and actually like to look at. So that's pretty much what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the year. That is the plan. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll bring this back over here. But that is it for this week's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you maybe not next week, but maybe in 2 weeks time. It kind of just really depends on how much I get done and how much, content I can put into a video. It kind of relies on how much I get done, but I will see you then. Thank you.